Welcome everybody. Let me give you a short introduction to the topic. So Chiara already introduced our panelists for today and also already mentioned that the reason we are doing is because we are part of this SmartNet project, the European project. But before we dive in, I just wanted to mention that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. So you have, of course, the SmartNet project that is ongoing, but there are several other FP7 or Horizon 2020 projects on this topic. Just to name a few, you have TSO-DSO and Flexiciency. Why is Tomas here? Well, Tomas has been one of the authors of this report, the Utility of the Future by Comillas and MIT. Also, a very nice report by TSO and DSO associations is the data management report issued in September. Regulators have also issued their view on this topic in September. And then, of course, last but not least, I would say, the pages that we've all been reading under the Christmas tree, the EU clean energy proposals by European Commission. I think most observers are really applauding these proposals. Maybe they're not perfect. Maybe the EU is, according to some, moving too fast, according to others, not fast enough. But I think we all agree and we are all proud that in the EU, for energy, we're still moving on this energy transition. And as we are still moving, we have a lot to discuss. And one of these topics to discuss is TSO and DSO coordination. And that's what we will do today. And to kick off this discussion, on the next slide here, I have one fragment, one article of that winter package. And if you read it, you will see that it assigns a role for the first time at European level to these distribution system operators for local congestion management. So what does that mean? Well, we foresee that DSO distribution grids might be faced with congestion in the future, just like TSOs, and that they might start to manage that actively. And here it is said for the first time that they will actually can have such a role. At the same time, maybe some others think that they should have a role that goes beyond congestion management towards balancing. But for the moment in the proposal, my reading is that balancing remains clearly a responsibility of TSOs in this proposal. And that then already leads to the first thing we can discuss with our panelists. But before we ask our panelists their view, we've prepared also a poll so that you can participate. Now you will see the poll. So first I would like to know from everybody in this debate. So do you agree? Do you agree with this article of the winter package that DSOs can have a role in local congestion management but not in balancing? Maybe you agree, yeah, you say yes, because they should have such a role. Maybe you say no, because you want them to have a bigger role. You want them to be also active in balancing, and that's the third option. Or you say no, we don't want DSOs to have any role. It was better as it was in the past, and you know, let them be. And I see many of you are already responding. We'll give you a bit more time. Okay. The poll is closed already for voting. Maybe you can reopen it, Chiara, because I thought it was still going on. Okay. Okay, so everybody that wanted to vote has voted, or still some more activity. Give them a bit more time. If you've already voted, what you can start doing is to give reactions in the discussion forum. So you see that below your screen, you have something called discussion forum where some people will already started to say hi. You can also put questions there, comments, views you have, and then I will try to pick it up during the discussion. Okay, so the results are broadcasted, so you can see that a clear winner in this poll is the option yes. So all of you think that that was a good idea. DSOs should have a responsibility to manage congestion in their own grids. But that also suggests that that is enough for you. So So some of you are saying, you definitely want them also to do local balancing, and almost nobody thinks that they should not have any role. Okay, so dear panelists, is anyone really eager to kick off, or do I just assign the one below me on the screen here, Tomas, to kick off, and then we work our way down?
Okay, I can start. Yeah, I think this winter package, I think, is reflecting what it is almost a reality in distribution, and is the distributed resources. Yeah, and these distributed resources are flexible, or could be more flexible even in the future, if we are assuming that we develop what we call demand response. We connect electric vehicles with batteries, storage, distributed generation. All those resources can provide new services, and in this case, one of those services could be the one that is related with congestion, because congestion and distribution today is not a big issue, because it has been always solved by the way of planning. Distribution companies has already make investments on wires and transformers and lines, and this is the way of managing the network. But in the future, with a lot of different resources and different patterns for loads and generation, the congestion possibilities for sure is going to increase, and for that we need local resources, and in this case connected also at the distribution level, that should be managed in a smart way for solving those problems, as it happens today with transmission and mainly generation at the TSO level. Therefore, for sure, I think I agree with the package, the winter package that proposed this new role for distribution system operators, which is a no easy function, because we should standardize all those services and the way of procuring of those services as a market-based. Regarding balancing is a system-wide service. Balancing is more in the hands of TSOs, and I think I agree also with the view of mainly TSOs are responsible for that. And what is new here is also the possibility for those flexible resources to procure balancing from the distribution side, and mainly from aggregation, because using aggregation you will pool those resources and could be in a level playing field, competing with and collaborating with centralized generators. Therefore, I think that's the way of making the need for new coordination between TSOs and DSOs, because those services are going to provide, those sources are going to provide services both to the distribution system operators, but also to the transmission system operators.
Okay. We already get some good comments in the discussion box that I will definitely pick up, but I will first allow Marco and Gianluigi to also make their opening statement about the results of the poll.
Okay. Well, I would like to take a non-fideistic approach to this problem, in the sense that I think that one should not give for granted what has been the practice in the past. So in the past, obviously, most of, or not to say everything of the resources needed in order to balance the system were taken from transmission network connected resources. That means that TSO was most naturally having a role, a leading role in this kind of procurement. For the future, we have to take, as we are all convinced that the future will not be the same as the present. Mr. Gomez has already mentioned the fact that there will be a lot of electrical vehicles connected to the network, but I think that there will be, most of all, a more noticeable than already not noticeable, but even more noticeable injection of distributed energy into the distribution sector of the network. That means that the load flow within the distribution networks will completely change, and the fact that the winter package assigns a role to the DSOs for congestion management that as to now is not a problem in distribution networks at all, or it's not a particular problem, means that the European Commission is convinced that there will be much more congestion, so up to the point to make a possible congestion management market liquid enough in order to manage. If so, also balancing for the same reasons cannot be done, in my opinion, without knowing what is the situation of the loads within the network, the underlying networks that have in the distribution sector. So I think that if some sections in distribution are very loaded, it's very unlikely that maybe those sections can provide services for the network. So it should be important, because we are in real time, we have not to forget that, to know the status of the networks together with the clearing of the balancing market itself. And that is a very challenging issue to be done by the TSO, because the TSO has already to keep under ice the situation within the transmission network. Cannot be responsible to have a complete and detailed picture of the networks that are underlying it, so all the distribution networks. So there are different possibilities to manage that, of course, but not necessarily all of them are efficient or can provide an assurance about the security of the procurement of the systems in real time. What we would like to make in the project SmartNet is exactly to analyze different schemes for the procurement of ancillary services, in particular balancing services, that takes into account different roles that both TSOs and DSO could play, and by taking into account the different possible roles, establish what are the pros and cons of each possible deployment. And only after cost-benefit analysis has been made, also from the quantitative way, because in SmartNet we are going to analyze in detail simulation of 3 nations, Italy, Spain, and Denmark. And depending on the result, in terms of cost and benefit, we would like to give our opinion about 5 different coordination schemes. After that, we will be able to say if for the future it is, in our vision, of course, more likely that one scheme is better than the other. Actually, a priori, we would like not to embrace one scheme with respect to the other, because we have simply not the elements to propose conclusions.
Okay, so we have Tomas saying, I agree, let's assign this role of local congestion management to DSOs, but I don't really see why we would also need to do that for balancing. And we have Marco and Gianluigi saying, we're also looking into that. We see even within assigning a role in balancing possible models, and we're not sure whether, the current situation, the current proposals is enough. That's basically what I'm hearing. We already have 2 participants. We have Matti and we have Rachel that were asking questions in the direction of, what do you mean? I mean, the poll is not well defined. You ask us to say if we think the DSO should have a role in local balancing, but what does that mean, having a role? And Rachel clarifies by saying, if the role is only to help the system operator, can be the TSO, to source frequency reserves from distribution level, that's also having a role. Or does it go as far as assigning a formal role to really act also in real time? So can our panelists maybe clarify, maybe Gianluigi, this is also an opportunity for you to clarify a bit the roles you will be looking at within assigning a role for local balancing. What are the levels for you? What are the dimensions of that?
Okay, well, as I said, we are not giving some a priori answer to that, but we are testing 5 different coordination schemes that are in alternative, and we would like to make some practical experience in simulation in order to understand what could be better. But the roles, of course, yes, can be increasing, depending on what kind of coordination scheme one wants to implement. The most traditional role that is also compatible with the present is a role in which congestion management is analyzed locally by the DSO, maybe by extra market methodology, and then the resources are brought directly to the TSO for participating also from the side of distribution to the market for ancillary service provision, in particular for balancing service provision. Of course, as the TSO cannot guarantee that a resource from distribution is dispatchable, it will be the local DSO that in a sort of pre-qualification phase guarantees that some resources are dispatchable and so can participate to the balancing market as a full-fledged offer, full-fledged bid, together with all the other resources. Of course, this is a very simple, or at least a very traditional way to tackle things. What I wonder, what in case the situation is more intricate, so the DSO can guarantee that a resource by itself is dispatchable. But what about the fact that you have different resources that are collected in order to participate and selected for balancing, and all together they will complicate the load flow. And so altogether, maybe even if each one of them singularly is dispatchable, altogether are not completely.
Okay, so it doesn't go as far as introducing another level. Today, what we have is we have a very first response to a frequency deviation that is a shared response, international, right? Then we bring the responsibility back to the national level. For you, local balancing is not having another layer saying within that time frame the responsibility is at distribution level. That's not what it means for you.
Probably that is not the most efficient way to tackle things because the pre-qualification cannot solve any problem, and we are already in real time, so there are some risks there. Other possibility is a little slightly more demanding from the DSO, is that the DSO manages with the local market congestion and then aggregates resources to be brought to the general market, so to the TSO itself, for participating to the global balancing market. That is another possibility. In any case, the two markets are in sequence. That doesn't guarantee any efficiency in that. And we have also to check whether the balancing market on one side is well equipped, but on the other side better if the local congestion market is sufficiently liquid. Third possibility is that TSO and DSO manage each one their own area. So the DSO is in charge of balancing for the distribution part, and the TSO is managing the part for the transmission. And they just are interlinked by means of a flow that is agreed to be exchanged between the transmission and distribution zones. That is, of course, something more demanding for the DSO side, but also is more complicated. Probably it will function well, provided that the flow that is exchanged, so the exchanged flows are well devised. We are studying how to do so, but in any case, somebody is arguing that that is too complicated. Another issue could be that TSOs and DSO together manage by means of a third party, maybe a global market operator, a market that has both transmission and distribution, everything inside one only melting pot. But of course, that could also be non-manageable, and so maybe some scheme of market coupling could be put in place between transmission and distribution that would facilitate putting in place that scheme.
Okay, so you're really looking at all the options, clearly, not excluding anything. Tomas, to your feeling, what is your feeling about some of these options?
Well, I think the main issue here is that to know that balancing is a system-wide service. And for that, you need pulling many resources, no matter where they are located. Probably they are located in different regions in the country or in a different. And also, if we know that network codes, they are looking for collaborating in balancing through neighborhood countries. Therefore, It's an issue of having a big market with liquidity and efficiency in the prices. Therefore, the pooling of resources is a critical issue. And for that, we cannot fragment the market in several markets or local markets or whatever. That's only happen if there are congestions, but hopefully congestions are not going to be the issue. And in this case, what we are talking about, which is new here, is that if we want to pool resources that are connected to a distribution network, those resources providing balancing can produce congestion in those distribution networks. Only in that case, if there is a role for the DSO. That is my opinion, my view, because also for pooling resources, DSO don't play any role because DSO is a regulated business, and for pooling resources, there are aggregators and there are market entities that should be pooling those resources. And this is a market, really, the market for balancing. Therefore, fragmentation is a big danger, and I don't see any role for DSOs in balancing, except if there are local congestions because of those distributed resources connected and providing balancing in those cases. Okay. This is the conflict that, in my opinion, DSO has to watch out.
Yeah, thank you, Tomas. So basically that connects a bit with a question of Matti. So Matti is doing a follow-up question and saying, does that mean what we refer to as local congestion management by DSOs, what we're actually talking about is not the same type of congestion management that we are used to talk about for TSOs, but it's rather about redispatching. And it seems to be in line with what you say. Like today, the role of balancing is clearly assigned to TSOs. But if those balancing actions lead to congestion, there is a need to redispatch, and that redispatching role is what we're actually giving to DSOs today. Is that correct? That I understand that in that way? And
yeah,
for you,
at least what we are talking about congestion for DSOs is congestion because congestion localized in distribution networks, and because of dispatch or redispatch of distributed resources connected to these distribution networks. That is the only function for DSOs. There is no function for DSOs when we are talking about congestion at the transmission system. Again, you can pool sources at the distribution level for solving congestion at the transmission system, but at the transmission system, the responsible for that is, again, the TSO.
Yeah, thank you. Let me also add to our discussion a comment by Mathieu France, who is referring to the electricity balancing guideline. And I fully agree with that. You tend to refer to the most recent proposals of the winter package, but indeed some of this work has already been done in the current balancing guidelines, where it's already mentioned that DSOs could do this. So Mathieu is right to point that out to us. Okay, so we are halfway our discussion, so I propose we go to the second step of the discussion, and we invite again everybody that is participating to answer to a poll first. That will then relaunch the discussion between the panelists and the chat box. So to do, sorry, can you first show the slide, Chiara? Because, yeah. Okay, so I already showed you that the winter package has this abstract, this article, giving these new tasks to DSOs. And there is another abstract that I wanted to share with you, Article 53. So referring to the fact that, okay, if DSOs are getting this kind of role, it means that more cooperation will be needed. So DSOs and TSOs shall cooperate for daily operation of their networks. But the proposals do not yet specify exactly how. And that's the next step for our discussion. So we are now in a world that we take as given that one of the models has been chosen for the moment, and it is a model in which DSOs are not yet doing really the balancing actions. even though that in the SmartNet project we also look at other worlds, but now let's take the world we are in. And so DSOs are only allowed to procure services to deal with local congestion management. And then the question is, when they start doing that, and even there is a new terminology in the winter package, so they are called non-frequency auxiliary services. So it's a new language, I would say. We already know that the balancing guidelines are now talking not anymore about primary, secondary, tertiary reserve, but we have frequency containment and frequency restoration. We have also replacement reserves. That's the TSO language. Now for DSOs, we have something that is called non-frequency auxiliary services that they can use for local congestion management. And then there are three questions. One is, should these new type of services be standardized and harmonized in cooperation with other DSOs and TSOs? So then the question is, do you agree with that or you disagree? The second question is, the same services, should they be jointly procured or tendered for by DSOs and TSOs? You know that for TSOs we are more and more going towards cross-border platforms, joint procurement. So will the same apply to the DSO level? Yes, no? What do you think about that? And then the third question is for, once we've defined the services and we've started to procure them, what about using them? So how will that look like, the activation? Should that be fully coordinated in real time between DSOs and TSOs? Yes, no? What do you think about that? And I see that already many of you are giving your view. Give you a bit more time. The results are broadcasted. So what do we have? So first on the standardization, we have a 100% agreement. So, and this is also foreseen in the winter package. In the winter package, it is foreseen that we will have new network codes on these non-frequency auxiliary services. So in those codes, there will be the opportunity to standardize and to harmonize. So many, now there is at least one person that doesn't agree anymore. That's good. That one person should say in the chat box why, so we can have a discussion on that. I'm not even sure if the panelists will agree, because if you see what I asked you to agree with, is not whether or not we should have harmonization, yes or no, but it's should that be harmonization with DSOs and TSOs. So maybe some of you think we only need harmonization among DSOs. Maybe TSOs are not concerned because they are a different type of service. So I think we can still have a discussion on that. Then the results on the joint procurement. There the majority thinks that we should have a joint procurement. Again, I'm not sure if that is an obvious answer. I'm curious to know what the panelists think. Then we have on the activation, there again, most agree that we should coordinate that. But again, it's not really a yes or no question. We deliberately ask you to take an extreme point, but it's up to the panelists to give a more nuanced view on this. Maybe this time we can start with Marco and Gianluigi. You can take one of the three that you prefer to react to. And then we get the discussion going.
I will start if it's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very, very challenging question because we are talking about standardization, but we don't even know which kind of services or ancillary services we will really require in the next future and more important in the far future. So, as Gianluigi just summarized a few moments ago, I don't want to summarize again all the investigation that we are doing in SmartNet. there are many coordination schemes in which TSO and DSO are jointly together access to the market for any kind of ancillary services, and some other kind of markets in which the TSO and DSO separately access to different markets. So it's quite challenging to agree or disagree with one of the statements without making a deep investigation. And in my opinion, it also depends on the kind of services, because there are some ancillary services that have local nature, so only specific or DSO and TSO of a specific area should access to that kind of market, and other kind of services that are, let's say, global. So I cannot think on any ancillary services that are not frequency controlled, that are not global, but in my opinion, that's something that should be carefully investigated. And I'm really looking forward to see which are the results that SmartNet is going to provide to us in order to really understand which is the best, let's say, coordination schemes that TSO and DSO should follow in order to obtain the highest benefits for the electricity system, energy system.
Yeah. Maybe before, let me quickly jump in to mention that Mathieu is sharing the fact that he was the one changing his view, and it seems to be a bit similar to what you say, Marco. You know, he says that non-frequency services are not auxiliary services are not well defined. I mean, what are we talking about? Is it black start? Is it what is it? Is it voltage related? So it's sort of in line with what you say, I think, Marco? Sorry, Gianluigi, please continue.
I would tend to say, for instance, for instance, reactive control can be more local for as a nature of the service, for instance. But that is not general. So I agree with Marco that one should treat one by one the different services. What I can add on the perspective of the project SmartNet is that we are performing 3 pilots in our project, and about different kinds of services and providers of the services that can participate to provide services for the system. In particular, in the Italian pilot that is led with the cooperation by Terna and Edina. Edina is the DSO of Südtirol, so the border with Austria. Actually, in that case, we are putting in place all apparatuses in order to monitor the possible potential providers of ancillary services coming from hydropower stations located in distribution. So to monitor that their availability, so their present status, the present status of the network around them, and the possibility of some contributions for on one side balancing, but on the other side also reactive compensation that they could bring for the system. And the idea is that there will be a concentration of this information from distribution sent to the control center, to the SCADA of the distributor, and then directly from the SCADA of the distributor up to the transmission system operator. Transmission system operator elaborates them in a concentrated way, the set point, both from frequency regulation and reactive compensation, and send back those set points to the relevant producers and also to some smart loads, and then in order to be activated. So of course we are supposing to send monitoring signals every 20 seconds, so very challenging. And so that information is brought up to the TSO, then a set point is elaborated and brought back. So we are verifying that everything of that can function, and it will be very important to know the results of this pilot.
Okay, thank you, Gianluigi. So both Marco and Gianluigi mainly reacted to the standardization part. There has been a lot of action in the chat box. For instance, I thank very much Pauline to actually copy-paste the definition of this type of services from the package into the chat box. Thank you very much for that. But maybe first, Tomas, you would like to give an opening statement before I bring to you some of the elements from the chat box.
Okay. Yeah. Regarding the service definition, I think probably there is a first challenge, which is the definition for TSO services, which mainly are probably not should be providing coordination with other DSOs or with the TSOs. Because as Gianluigi and Marco already say, that most of the services that we are talking about, reactive power, voltage control, or even the congestion in the feeders that we are talking about, local feeders, most of the services are very local in nature. There are few players or few units, flexible units, that can solve the problems, and in this case, the scope of those services and the standardization of those services is very limited in scope. Therefore, what we have to do is first try to standardize those services from the DSO point of view, which are really the ones that can be provided by the flexible resources, that new flexible resources that are going to be connected or are connected. And once we have that, probably there is a place for harmonization at the European level, because as you know, that distribution is very national, even regional in scope, and very diversity in many countries are very different distribution companies one each other. Therefore, for sure there is going to be a long way for harmonization at the EU level, taking the best practices, for instance. And at that point, I think there is a role for the new EU TSO entity that has been already also proposed in the winter package, because this kind of harmonization, little by little and progressively, is going to be needed in this problem, right? And once we are making progress on that, there is the second challenge, which is the case of needed coordination with the TSOs. That is the case, for instance, when the sources are providing kind of local services, but also they are cooperating in the balancing, which is a system-wide services. In those kind of conflicts, it's very important to have a good coordination. Also in the pre-qualification or the opportunities for people participating in both services, there are economic studies for doing what is the most profitable for the flexible units. And in those cases, there is a need for coordination in the way of procurement the services. But I repeat that the most challenging first thing is how do the DSOs become really system operators, and they start to use the flexible resources that they have. And this is a kind of a standardization problem, and also there is a lot of work for national regulators and those kind of national issues that should standardize those problems first.
Yeah, thank you. Let me invite all of you to look in the chat box to the comment of Imon, because this has triggered a very interesting discussion that is ongoing there, and it's in relation to, maybe we can make the chat box a bit bigger. Yeah, thank you. If you scroll a bit up, you will see the original question from Imon Lanoy. So the statement is that when DSOs redispatch to alleviate local congestion, they may change the flow at the primary substation with the TSO. So without counter-trading redispatch elsewhere in the system, disactivation of non-frequency reserve will require counteracting balancing actions by the TSO. Therefore, congestion management can have balancing consequences that shift the cost from one area of the network to another. Do the panelists have any thoughts on whether this issue can be managed? And then, for instance, Mark said on question 2, I would imagine that different operators can buy different services for different purposes, so they don't need to procure them jointly, only if they affect each other. And he refers to the Imon example. The markets where they are procured should be linked, shouldn't they? So both panelists, all three, yeah. Gianluigi, please, you can start. We don't hear you, Gianluigi. You are muted, I think.
The floor is open, of course, for different solutions because as everybody has said till now, there is a need of standardization of this definition, even definition of those extra balancing services, and most of that after the definition of the standardization, then there is a need to define how to procure those services. So there are pros and cons of different solutions. Procure via market or extra market. It depends, of course. Market is a way to get in a competitive way, and so in an efficient way, because competition and efficiency should be more or less synonymous if there is no market power and blah, 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 blah. But in any case, market is a very positive possibility, provided that the market can be set up. So if if those services have two characteristics: first, to be sufficiently widespread as a possibility to provide those services, and not that there is a one only potential provider of that service. That is sometimes the case, for instance, for reactive services because of the locality of those services. First of all, there is a problem of liquidity of the market. Second of all, there is a problem of extension of those markets. So liquidity and extension have some relationship, but in any case, we have to be sure that something that can be provided by different providers in order to see that a market can be put in place for that. Then, of course, if you have a different products that have to be purchased via market, you have to understand whether the market can be one only or different ones, decoupled. Of course, the two solutions are possible both, provided that a market is suitable for both. In case one only market is put in place, of course, there is a possibility of a better optimization, because the more you put inside, as everything is interacting, the better solution, the more optimized solution can you have. But on the other side, you have to be realistic and say that maybe putting together in one only melting pot everything can be too demanding for a market itself. And so one has to see what is the proportion within the market, but also the geographical extension, because we are mentioning a sort of geographical procurement. So what is a geographical procurement? Within one nation, or we want also in a relationship of what is also claimed in the balancing code by ETOI, to have the possibility in the future to extend it to a transnational procurement of those services. Of course, the more you extend, the more complicated becomes a market algorithm, even if you try to decouple the algorithms and try to put in place some split into sub-problems. But nonetheless, it comes a moment in which, in real time, you are not any longer able to tackle the problem. So I think this has to be considered very, very attentively, because one has to be realistic. So we have some computational limits. We are in real time, so we have to react in very small moments, very small amounts of time, and so we have to take into account the capacity of nowadays services, servers.
Okay. Meanwhile, I was reading some more comments in the chat box. So some, like Manuel saying, solve local problems at local level. Why even coordinate with other DSOs? And Klaus saying the other view of one marketplace for all bids, where TSO-DSO can pick up the bids they need, and then we avoid that different services are being procured twice and cannot really deliver. So we don't want one bid to be used at the same time. So, Tomas, any view on this procurement issue?
Yes, for sure. When we are talking about different services with the same agents that procure those services, there is a conflict, right? And there is a need for coordination. For instance, there is the sample today of today generators are offering frequency research or frequency services, balancing service together with congestion management. And through the TSO with different platforms or with same platform, but enough coordinated, they solve those conflicts, right? In the future, when depending on the level of penetration of those distributed resources and how much important they are in comparison to centralized resources, that could be a real problem, or we have to anticipate that probably. But the level of coordination, I think, should be limited in the way that the main issue here is distributed resources can produce local congestion problems. Mainly is that the issue, and also can solve those problems. Only those sources. And in this case, if you don't have those problems, they can participate no matter with no any restrictions to the main services that today are system-wide services, which are the frequency research or the balancing or even at the to solve congestion problems at the transmission system at the substation point. Therefore, I think we should be practical in the way of looking to these problems, because right now what it is relevant is those resources, distributed resources, should be incorporated to the main markets that are already working at the TSO level. This is the main priority from my point of view. They should be incorporated through aggregation. We have examples in the States or in some, for instance, in capacity markets or in frequency reserve. They are participating already. Therefore, the role of the TSO should be limited only to the local issues when you have local problems at the distribution system. And for creating those problems and for solving those problems, the role of the TSO and the coordination with the TSO is important. But only for those things. We cannot complicate things and starting to mix DSOs with DSOs, DSOs with TSOs, countries with countries. That is going to be a chaos.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We just have a few minutes left, and we can go down on this topic, but maybe it's good to zoom out. We started with a high-level discussion on the roles. We zoomed in a bit on specific issues regarding service standardization, procurement, activation. But if we zoom out a little bit, all what we are discussing here is how to deal with distribution constraints, if we will have them, when we will have them, as a kind of out-of-the-market solution. So we will run wholesale markets as if nothing happens in distribution, and then we will come with problems in real time, and then we will have coordination between TSOs and DSOs to solve those problems. And we've been discussing on how to do that. Another way to anticipate these problems is what we call, what we do now at international level. We anticipate congestion problems, and we integrate those constraints in the market. We call it market coupling. We are discussing more and more what is an efficient set of bidding zones. Probably it will be smaller than a country. Do you envisage a future in which these bidding zones could even go down to distribution level? Is this something that only academics discuss, or is this something you can really see happening? And is it something you've been looking at in your research? Gianluigi first, and then Tomas.
It depends, of course, how cramped the distribution network panorama will be in the future. So it depends how justified is to zoom things in distribution. But it could be take a sense also to arrive to a zonal level that is coincides with nodes, system nodes. That is the most efficient way to handle, for instance, congestion, but also balancing. I think that depends from the future. But for sure, what is important to be understood now is that whatever can be the solution should be also feasible on the side of the organization that are to tackle this. So we have thought up to now to the role of the DSO by thinking that the DSO is one of the big DSOs that have a good structure, a good know-how, a good level of coordination or can achieve a good level of coordination of what and monitoring of the resources that are inside their zones. But unfortunately, the panorama of the DSOs is very variegated, and we have a lot of very, very small DSOs that are not able for sure to organize by themselves and monitor the system and coordinate with the TSOs and so on. We are speaking about a so variegated situation as, for instance, in the Südtirol area that we are targeting in our SmartNet project, we have different levels of DSOs that are below other DSOs. So we have, for instance, EDINA, that for Südtirol is the DSO that has the contact with the network by TSO, by TERN, but we have underlying DSOs that are only connected to EDINA, and we are up to 3 levels of underlying DSOs. So the problem is, in my opinion, not only the one of recognizing what are the problems about congestion management, possibility to provide services from distribution and so on, but also to rationalize the situation at the level of the DSOs, so as to analyze things, and maybe in case DSOs are not able, because too small, to tackle this problem by themselves, to aggregate them by themselves in order to create some extra figures that can be local market operators, for instance, that are able to be competitive and up to date in order to tackle the problem. Because otherwise, I suppose that the fragmentation of the DSO levels can be a problem. Real problem.
Okay, thank you. Tomas, you've also been looking at locational nodal pricing up to distribution level, right?
Right. I think in Utility of the Future, the report that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation is, I think we have been looking to this issue of local or nodal prices at the distribution networks. I have to say that this granularity is a high complex in terms of real implementation in practice, but the benefits from that depends also on the level of stress that you have in the distribution networks. And that is also very local, because you know that there are regions where the networks are good enough, and there are other regions where you have specific places or areas where it's not possible to do new investments. Therefore, the level of granularity that you can implement those prices and the efficiency of these prices is going to be very case dependent. This is something that should be well understood before going to the implementation of these prices. And the benefits of that are always, if you implement that, you can get the resources, the right resources responding in the right price, in the right time, and that is a value for that. Also, there is also a problem of market power, if you want to say like that, because typically, as small is the market in scope, the most possibilities for doing market power for the agents. Therefore, that is a real problem also with implementation of nodal prices at very, very small scale of distribution networks. But that, yeah, there is not only theoretical aspect, there are also implementation aspects which should be taken into account.
Okay, thank you. We still have 2 minutes, so this for me is just enough time to first thank our panelists, Tomas, Gianluigi, Marco, thank you very much. Thank you also for everybody, and especially those that were very active in the chat box. I excuse myself that I was not able to pick up every point. For instance, Samuele also made a good point that I couldn't pick up. But you know, what I should say also is that we have the topic of the month, a blog at Florence School of Regulation, and this month I am blogging for FSR, and it's on the winter package. And I will also make a summary, try to make a summary of what we discussed in this hour in the next blog that will be published normally already this week, so I know what to do tomorrow. And with that, I thank everybody.
I would like to thank the moderator as well for moderating this great session. Thank you, everybody, the panel. I would like also to remind the audience, this very active audience we had today, that the recording will be available soon on the event webpage. And also for all the other FSR online events, they can check on the website or subscribe to our newsletter. That's all from my side. We would like, as usual, to hear from the audience. So, of course, they can contact us also via the webpage to share any feedback. Thank you very much to the panel, Thomas, Gianluigi, Marco, and Leo. And see you next time online.
Okay.
I'm now
Thank you.
closing the session. Bye.
Bye-bye.